The rain in Seattle never really stopped. It just changed its mind about how hard it wanted to fall. That Thursday night, it had settled on a steady cold drizzle, the kind that soaked through jackets and memories alike. Noah Grayson finished his shift at Harvey and Company a little after 11. His hands were black with machine oil, his back ached from crawling under servers all day, and the fluorescent lights of the maintenance bay still buzzed behind his eyes like angry insects. He was 35, a widower for 4 years, and the father of an 8-year-old girl who still believed her mother was only away for a while. Lila waited for him every night, with the same routine pajamas on, teeth brushed, one chapter of whatever comic book she was obsessed with that week. Tonight, he was late again, but he'd promised her pancakes in the morning. That was enough. Noah was crossing the parking garage keys already in hand when the lobby intercom crackled through the speaker near the elevator. "Grayson Maintenance, Grayson?" He paused, frowning. "Yeah, Miss Ward needs a ride home. Her driver called in sick and she specifically asked for you. Said no one else is reliable at this hour." Elena Ward. The name landed like a stone in still water. Noah had seen her, everyone had. CEO of Harvey & Co., 43 years old. Tall, sharp-featured, always in tailored black or charcoal, moving through the building like she owned the air itself. Which technically she did. She was the kind of woman who made people straighten their posture without realizing it. Noah had never spoken to her beyond a polite nod in the hallway. He fixed machines. She signed million-dollar contracts, different planets. But the request wasn't optional. He took the elevator up to the executive floor. The hallway was empty except for the soft glow of emergency lights and the faint scent of expensive coffee. Elena Ward stood near the glass doors, coat draped over one arm, phone in hand, staring out at the rain-slicked city as though it owed her an explanation. She didn't look up when he approached. "Ms. Ward," he said quietly, "I'm ready when you are." She glanced at him, then brief assessing, and nodded once. No smile. No thank you. Just the smallest tilt of her head toward the elevator. They rode down in silence. The only sound was the soft hum of the machinery and the occasional drip from Noah's wet sleeve onto the floor. When they reached the garage, he opened the passenger door of his old Ford pickup, clean, but not new, and waited. Elena hesitated for half a second, then climbed into the back seat without a word. Noah didn't comment. He slid behind the wheel, started the engine, and pulled out into the rain. The city blurred past in streaks of red taillights and sodium yellow. The wipers moved in steady rhythm metronome to the quiet. Noah kept his eyes on the road, but every few minutes his gaze flicked to the rearview mirror. She sat perfectly straight, hands folded in her lap, staring out the window as though the glass held answers she hadn't found anywhere else. Her face was pale in the passing streetlights' shadows, carving lines around her mouth and eyes that hadn't been there in the company photos on the website. He wondered briefly why she'd asked for him. He wasn't security. He wasn't executive transport. He was just reliable. That was the word the receptionist had used. Reliable. The silence stretched until they passed Lake Union, the water black and restless under the rain. "You don't need to take the long way," she said suddenly, voice low and rough like someone who hadn't spoken in hours. "I know where I live." Noah nodded, even though she wasn't looking at him. "Yes, ma'am." Another mile passed. Then quieter. "You have a daughter, don't you?" He glanced in the mirror again. Her eyes were still on the window, but her reflection caught his. "Yes," he said. "Lila?" 8. She gave the smallest nod as though confirming something she'd already known. They reached her street, a quiet wooded lane lined with modern homes that cost more than Noah would earn in 3 lifetimes. He pulled into the circular drive, killed the engine, and waited. Elena didn't move right away. When she finally reached for the door handle, she paused. "Wait," she said. She stepped out into the rain, disappeared through the front door without an umbrella, and returned less than 3 minutes later holding a small plastic container tied with a simple cloth ribbon. She opened the back door again, leaned in, and placed it on the seat beside her former spot. "For your daughter," she said. "Vanilla cream cakes. I used to buy them every week for someone who isn't here anymore." Noah stared at the container, then at her. "How did you know I had a kid?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips, the first one he'd ever seen. "There's a child's sock hanging from your rearview mirror," she said. "Only a father who's raising a child alone would leave something like that where everyone can see it and not feel embarrassed." She closed the door before he could respond. Noah watched her walk up the steps and disappear inside. The porch light flicked off behind her. He sat there for a long minute, rain drumming on the roof, before he reached over and picked up the container. When he got home, Lila was asleep on the couch, comic book open across her chest, one sock missing. He carried her to bed, then sat at the kitchen table and opened the box. Inside were 6 perfect vanilla cream cakes, still fresh, the kind with the thick frosting Lila used to beg her mother to make on Sundays. He stared at them until his eyes burned. Not love. Not yet. But something shifted inside him that night, quiet, irreversible. For the first time in 4 years, someone had seen him. Not the mechanic, not the widower. Just a father. And that small, simple recognition felt more dangerous than any storm Seattle could throw at him. The week that followed felt strangely ordinary, as though the night with Elena Ward had been a dream Noah had invented to make the rain more bearable. He went to work, fixed servers, came home to Lila's excited chatter about school, and tried not to think about the small plastic container still sitting on his kitchen counter, empty now, but still carrying the faint vanilla scent that made his daughter smile every time she walked past it. He told himself it was nothing. A CEO didn't remember mechanics. A woman like Elena Ward didn't call back. Then Saturday night arrived. Noah was in the garage wiping down the hood of his truck under the single overhead bulb when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost let it go to voicemail, but something, maybe the memory of that quiet wait, made him answer. Hello, a pause. Then her voice, softer than he remembered, almost uncertain. I'm sorry if this is too late. I don't want to be alone tonight. Could you drive me? Not home, just around. Noah's hand tightened on the rag. I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. He told his mother he'd be late, picking Lila up from her sleepover. She didn't ask questions. She never did anymore. She just said, "Be safe, honey." When he pulled up to the executive entrance, Elena was already waiting. No coat this time, just a dark sweater and jeans, clothes he'd never seen her wear at the office. She looked smaller, somehow, less armored. She climbed into the back seat again, but the moment he started the engine, she spoke. I hate the back seat, she said quietly. It makes me feel like I'm always the one in control. I'm tired of being in control. Before he could respond, she opened the door, stepped out, and got into the front passenger seat beside him. Noah kept his eyes on the road as she buckled in. The cab of the truck suddenly felt smaller, warmer, her perfume something clean and expensive, mixed with the faint smell of motor oil and rain. Where to, he asked. Nowhere in particular, she answered. Just drive. So he did. Seattle at night was a different city. The downtown lights reflected off wet pavement like scattered stars. He took them along the waterfront, past the Ferris wheel glowing against the black water, then up toward Queen Anne, where the streets narrowed and the houses sat quiet behind hedges. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Eventually, she broke the silence. I turned 43 last month, she said, staring straight ahead. I rented out the entire top floor of Le Jardin. No guests, just me, a bottle of wine, and my assistant, who stayed for exactly 45 minutes before she had to leave for her own life. Noah swallowed. That sounds lonely. It was. She gave a small, dry laugh. I told myself it was fine. I'm good at being alone. I've had years of practice. He glanced at her. In the dashboard light, her face looked softer. The lines around her eyes deeper. I remember the night my wife died, he said after a moment. Lila was 4. She kept asking when Mommy was coming back from the hospital. I didn't have an answer that didn't hurt, so I just held her until she fell asleep on my chest. I think I cried more that night than I have in the 4 years since. Elena turned her head slightly, studying him. You never talk about it at work, she said. No one asks. They drove in silence again, the wipers sweeping slow arcs across the windshield. When they reached the pull-off near Discovery Park, Noah eased the truck to the side of the road. The rain had eased to a fine mist. Beyond the trees, the sound of the Sound rolled in like distant breathing. Elena unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out. Noah followed without thinking. She walked to the wooden railing that overlooked the water. The wind lifted strands of her hair. She didn't turn when he came up beside her. Have you ever wanted to be weak? she asked, voice barely above the wind. Every damn day, he answered honestly, but I'm afraid if I let myself fall apart, no one will be there to pick up the pieces for Lila. Elena's hands gripped the railing. I've spent my whole life making sure no one ever has to pick up my pieces. Turns out, that's lonelier than falling apart. She turned then. Her eyes weren't the CEO's eyes anymore. They were just a woman's eyes, tired, searching, a little afraid. She took one step, then another. When she was close enough that he could feel the warmth of her in the cold night, she lifted her hand and placed it flat against his chest, right over his heart. It was racing. He knew she could feel it. I've never done this with anyone who works for me, she whispered. I've never felt this with anyone at all, he answered. Then she rose on her toes and kissed him. It wasn't hungry. It wasn't desperate. It was careful, like two people who had both been broken once and were afraid of breaking again. When she pulled back, her forehead rested against his. I don't know what this is, she murmured. Me neither, he said. But I don't want it to stop. She exhaled a small sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Take me home, she said. He drove her back in silence, but this time the quiet felt different, full, instead of empty. When they reached her house, she didn't get out immediately. Would you like to come in? She asked. For tea. Just tea. He followed her inside. The house was vast and modern, all clean lines and glass, but it felt strangely hollow. She led him to the kitchen, put the kettle on, and they sat at the island counter while the water heated. They talked about small things, Lila's favorite comic books, the way Elena still couldn't make pancakes without burning them, the fact that neither of them had slept properly in years. Eventually the tea was gone, and Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. For the first time in forever, she let herself fall asleep without pills, without the weight of tomorrow pressing down. Noah stayed until the sky began to lighten. When he stood to leave, she caught his hand. I'm 43, she said quietly. I'm older than you. I have more money than I know what to do with. And I'm terrified. He squeezed her fingers. But you're the first person who's made me want to wake up tomorrow, he told her. She smiled, small real, and let him go. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city was quiet, washed clean. And for the first time in 4 years, Noah Grayson didn't feel like he was driving home alone. The days that followed the first night together slipped into a careful rhythm, one that felt both fragile and necessary. At Harvey & Co., nothing changed on the surface. Elena Ward remained the untouchable CEO sharp suits, clipped decisions eyes that never lingered. Noah Grayson stayed the quiet technician in the basement maintenance bay, grease-stained sleeves, polite nods, head down when executives passed. But beneath the routine, something had shifted forever. They met in stolen moments, a glance across the lobby that lasted a second longer than it should, a brush of fingers when passing a file in the hallway, a late-night text from her that simply read, "Still awake," and his reply, "Always." They never spoke of it at work. They never touched in the building. They simply existed in the same space, carrying the secret like a shared heartbeat. One Saturday morning, Noah took Lila to the downtown mall. She wanted new markers for her comic book drawings and a cinnamon pretzel the size of her head. He held her hand as they wove through the crowd, listening to her chatter about the superhero she was inventing, a girl who could fly, but only when no one was watching. They were in line at the pretzel stand when a familiar voice came from behind. Lila. Noah turned. Elena stood there, no makeup, hair pulled into a loose ponytail, wearing an oversized cream sweater and dark jeans. She looked almost ordinary, almost like any other woman shopping on a weekend. Lila blinked up at her, then smiled shyly. "Hi," she said. Elena crouched to her level voice, gentle. "Hi, sweetheart. Remember me?" Lila nodded. "Your daddy's friend, the one who gave me the cakes." Elena's eyes flicked to Noah for the briefest second, then back to Lila. "That's right. I'm Aunt Elena." She paused as though testing the word. "It's nice to see you again." Lila tilted her head. "You don't look like a CEO today." Elena laughed, quiet, real. "Today I'm just Elena. No titles, no meetings." Noah watched them, heart in his throat. Lila reached out and touched the sleeve of Elena's sweater. "It's soft," she said, "like a cloud." Elena's expression softened further. You can borrow it sometime if you want. They stood there for a moment, 3 people in a crowded mall pretending it was normal. Then Lila tugged Noah's hand. Can Aunt Elena come get pretzels with us? Noah looked at Elena. She looked back at him, something vulnerable in her eyes. I'd like that, she said. They ate pretzels together on a bench outside the bookstore. Lila talked nonstop about school, about her comic, about how she wanted a dog, but her dad said maybe next year. Elena listened like it was the most important conversation in the world. When Lila ran off to look at a display of graphic novels, Elena turned to Noah. She's wonderful, she said quietly. She is, he agreed. She's the only reason I still get up every day. Elena's gaze dropped to her hands. I've never been around children much. I didn't think I'd know what to say. You did just fine, he told her. She smiled, small, uncertain. I'm glad. 2 days later, everything shattered. An anonymous email landed in the HR inbox at 8:17 a.m. on Monday. Subject concern regarding executive conduct. Attachment a single photo. It was grainy, taken from across the street in the early morning light. Noah's truck parked in front of Elena's gate. Him stepping out, her standing on the porch in a robe, handing him a travel mug. They weren't touching. They weren't even looking at each other for more than a second. But the way she watched him drive away said everything. By noon, the board had called an emergency meeting. Not public. Not yet. But the message was clear: clarify the relationship or face consequences. Elena sat in her office, blinds drawn, staring at the photo on her screen. Noah found her there after hours when the building was nearly empty. He knocked once, then stepped inside. She didn't look up. You've seen it. Yeah, she exhaled slowly. They're not firing you, not yet, but they want me to address the optics. They're worried about shareholder perception, a CEO dating a maintenance technician. It's a headline waiting to happen. Noah crossed the room, stopped in front of her desk. Then let me go in there. Let me tell them it's not what they think, that I didn't ask for this. Her voice was sharp, almost panicked. If you walk into that room, they'll paint you as the opportunist, the guy who used his position to get close to the boss. They'll drag your name through every tabloid filter they can find. Lila will see it. Your mother will see it. Everyone will. He stared at her. And what about you? She finally met his eyes. I'm 43, single, childless, running a billion-dollar company. If I step wrong even once, the narrative writes itself, desperate older woman clinging to youth, abusing power. I've spent 20 years building this reputation. One photo and it's gone. Noah felt something cold settle in his chest. So, what do we do? Elena looked away. We stop. The words landed like a physical blow. She stood, walked to the window, arms wrapped around herself. I'm taking a leave of absence, she said quietly. Voluntary. Effective immediately. The board will announce it as strategic reflection time. No scandal. No story. Noah's voice cracked. And us. She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I can't ask you to hide, and I can't let you be destroyed because of me. He stepped closer. Elena, don't. She held up a hand. Please, just go home to Lila. She needs you more than I do. He stood there helpless, watching her turn back to the window. That night, he drove past her house. The lights were off. He parked across the street for 20 minutes, then left a small note under her door. If you're closing the door because you're scared, I'll understand. But if you ever need me to stand here again, I will. He didn't hear from her. 3 days later, the company-wide email went out. Elena Ward would be stepping away for personal reflection and strategic planning. Interim leadership was already in place. Noah went back to his shifts, his routines, his daughter. But every hallway felt longer. Every quiet moment felt louder. And for the first time since his wife died, the silence inside him wasn't just grief. It was absence. 30 days. That was how long Elena Ward disappeared from Harvey and Cohen's and from Noah's life. The company moved on quickly. Interim leadership took over with polished announcements about strategic reflection and renewed focus. Employees whispered for a week, then stopped. Life in the building returned to its usual rhythm of deadlines, coffee runs, and fluorescent hum. For Noah, the days blurred into something quieter, heavier. He woke at the same time every morning, made breakfast. For Lila drove her to school, fixed machines, came home, cooked dinner, read bedtime stories. The routine hadn't changed, but the silence inside it had. He no longer checked his phone for messages that never came. He no longer looked up when the executive elevator dinged. He simply existed, carrying the absence like a stone in his pocket, small enough to hide, heavy enough to feel every step. Lila noticed, first, of course. One evening, while Noah was fixing the lamp in the living room, she sat cross-legged on the floor with her sketchbook pencil hovering. "Daddy," she asked without looking up. "Yeah, Bug. Is Aunt Elena still your friend?" Noah's hand stilled on the screwdriver. The bulb flickered once, then steadied. He set the tool down slowly. "Why do you ask, Lila?" Shrugged, still drawing. "You're quieter now, like when Mommy first went away. And you don't smile the same when you look at your phone." He exhaled long and slow. Aunt Elena had to go take care of some grown-up things, he said carefully. She might be gone for a while. Lila finally looked at him, brown eyes, serious. Grown-ups always say that when they're scared. But Aunt Elena didn't seem like the kind who runs away. Noah swallowed the lump in his throat. "Sometimes even brave people need time." Lila nodded as though that made perfect sense, then went back to her drawing. That night, Noah lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words. He thought about the note he'd left under Elena's door. He thought about the empty space beside him in the truck. He thought about how for the first time in years he had let himself want something more than survival. And he realized he wasn't angry. He was just waiting. On the 31st day, a thin envelope arrived in the mail, no return address, just his name in careful handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of cream stationery. "Noah, I left because I needed to remember who I am when the title is gone. For 20 years, I've been Elena Ward's CEO. For the last 30 days, I've been Elena, only Elena. No boardroom, no schedule, no armor. It was terrifying. And it was necessary. I'm not running anymore. I'm not asking you to wait. But if you still want to know the woman behind the name, I'll be at the cabin on Crescent Lake until the end of autumn. No pressure, no promises. Just a door that's open if you choose to walk through it. Elena." He read it 3 times. Then he folded it carefully, placed it in his wallet, and went to pick up Lila from school. That evening, after she was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table with the letter in front of him. He didn't call anyone. He didn't ask for advice. He simply stood up, grabbed his keys, and drove. The road to Crescent Lake wound through pine forests, the air growing sharper as he climbed. The cabin was small, cedar-sided, tucked against the water's edge. A single porch light glowed against the dusk. Elena stood on the steps when he pulled up, arms wrapped around herself against the evening chill. She wore jeans, a soft gray sweater, hair loose around her shoulders. No makeup, no power. Just her. She didn't speak when he got out of the truck. Neither did he. He walked up the path, stopped at the bottom step, and looked at her. "You came," she said quietly. "I did." She exhaled a small cloud in the cold air. "I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure either," he admitted. "But I kept thinking about what Lila said, that you're not the kind of person who runs away." Elena's lips curved just barely. "I ran long enough," she said. "I needed to stand still and see what was left when everything else was gone." Noah took one step up. "And what did you find?" She met his eyes. "That I'm still here, and that I still want you. Not because I need saving, not because I'm lonely, but because choosing you feels like the most honest thing I've ever done." He took another step. "I don't care about the age difference," he said. "I don't care about the titles. I don't care what anyone else thinks. I just want to stand next to you, not behind you, not in front of you, just beside you." Elena's breath caught. She stepped down to meet him on the middle stair. When she reached him, she didn't kiss him right away. She simply rested her forehead against his eyes closed. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too," he answered. "But I'm not running anymore, neither am I. Then she lifted her face, and they kissed slow, certain, like two people who had finally found the courage to stop hiding. They stood there on the porch steps for a long time, wrapped in each other, listening to the lake lap against the shore. Later inside the cabin, they sat by the fire with mugs of tea. They talked about everything and nothing. About the future they weren't afraid to imagine anymore, about the life they wanted to build quiet, real theirs. When the fire burned low, Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. "Thank you," she murmured, "for waiting." Noah kissed the top of her head. "Thank you," he said, "for choosing to stay." 1 year later, the small house on the edge of Lake Washington had become theirs, not grand, not ostentatious, just warm. Cedar siding, wide windows overlooking the water, a porch swing that creaked pleasantly in the breeze. Noah had built the kitchen island himself, sanding the wood until it was smooth enough for Lila to draw on without tearing her paper. Elena had planted lavender along the walkway, the kind that bloomed purple every spring and smelled like quiet hope. They had settled into a life that felt earned. Noah still worked at Harvey and Company, though he'd taken on more flexible hours enough to be home when Lila got off the bus. Elena had stepped away from the CEO role permanently. She now ran a small investment fund from a home office advising startups with the same sharp mind she'd always had, but without the armor. She wore soft sweaters more often than suits. She laughed louder. She let herself rest. Lila was 9, now taller than she'd been a year ago, with a smile that lit up rooms. She called Elena Mom. Elena, without anyone prompting her. It had happened gradually. One night she'd slipped and said it during dinner, then looked up with wide eyes as if waiting for correction. None came. The word stayed, and it fit. One quiet Saturday afternoon, Noah was in the living room, kneeling beside the old wooden chair with the broken leg. He had sandpaper in one hand, glue in the other, fixing it the way he fixed most things in his life, patiently, without rush. Elena sat on the couch nearby, mending a throw pillow needle, moving in slow, even stitches. She glanced over at him. "Do you think people can live together forever without getting married?" she asked, voice light, but curious. Noah paused, looking up at her. "Sure they can. Marriage isn't a requirement. It's just a promise made in front of people who matter." She nodded, eyes on her stitching. "I've never needed a husband. Not for money, not for status, not even for company." He set the sandpaper down. "I know. But I want to call you my husband," she continued quietly. "Not because I need you to fix anything, but because I want to stand beside you in the world and say, this is the man who chose me." And I chose him back. Noah rose, slowly crossed the room, and knelt in front of her. He took her hand, the one still holding the needle, and pressed his lips to her knuckles. "Then marry me," he said simply. "No diamond, no big show. Just us promising to keep choosing each other." Elena's eyes shimmered. She set the pillow aside, cupped his face with both hands. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." The wedding was small. 23 people in the backyard of Noah's mother's house on a late summer evening. Fairy lights strung through the trees. A long wooden table covered in wildflowers and mismatched plates. No orchestra. No 5-tier cake. Just good food, laughter, and the soft sound of water lapping nearby. Lila wore a simple lavender dress, barefoot, carrying a single white rose. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, she whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "If anyone says no, I'll throw this rose at them." The laughter rolled across the yard like a warm wave. Noah's vows were short. "I don't promise you perfection," he said, voice steady. "I don't promise you will never hurt or never doubt. I only promise that when the hard days come, and they will, I won't walk away. I'll stand beside you, hold your hand, and keep choosing you every single day." Elena's voice trembled only once. "I thought love at 43 was a luxury I'd missed," she said. "I thought I'd spent too long building walls to ever let anyone in again. But you showed me that the strongest walls are the ones built together. I choose you, Noah, not because you complete me, but because together we are more ourselves than we ever were alone." When they kissed, Lila cheered louder than anyone. 3 months later, they moved into the lake house full-time. Elena's office overlooked the water. Noah's workshop sat in the back, tools neatly lined up. Lila had her own room with a wall full of comic book posters and a window seat where she read until the stars came out. One evening, the three of them sat around the kitchen table eating pancakes Noah had made slightly lopsided but perfect in their imperfection. Lila took a big bite, then looked between them. "If we ever get a baby," she said matter-of-factly, "I hope it likes comics and doesn't steal my markers." Elena laughed softly, hand drifting to her stomach. She was only a few weeks along, but the secret glowed quietly between her and Noah. We'll make sure Noah promised reaching over to ruffle Lila's hair. Later, after Lila went to bed, Noah and Elena stood on the porch wrapped in a blanket, watching the lake reflect the moon. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "We didn't need rescuing," she said quietly. "We just needed someone who stayed." Noah kissed her temple. "And we both did." The house lights were warm behind them. The water was calm in front, and for the first time in their lives, neither of them felt like they were running out of time. They were simply home,